Hello, everybody. So how about we continue to kick ass with mindfulness, wisdom, and compassion? What do you say? So we have a very special panel. In this panel, we hope to explore what it means to cultivate mindfulness and compassion, not only as a personal practice and an individual practice, but in order to serve as a foundation for social transformation and systems change. And we have a really, really special group of people here who are doing just that work, that are going to share their stories with you. Each of my friends here on stage are change agents in the communities in which they work. Each is working in a very significant and profound way to bring the practices of mindfulness and compassion to the populations that they serve for the purpose of social transformation and systems change. So I couldn't be more pleased that they get to share their stories and hopefully share what's possible, that systems can potentially actually practice and change these very things we're aspiring for. And just to set a little bit of context and in full disclosure, we at the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, where I work, have had the pleasure and the honor of working with each of our friends here in a really meaningful way to offer, the core tools and programs of SIY to their populations, and then they do so much more and continue to expand the work. So with that, I would just love to invite each to share their stories, and really each to think about this core question, which is, or perhaps to share rather, your personal journey, the work you do, and the link you see between mindfulness and social transformation. So share your personal journey, your work, the link between mindfulness and social transformation. If you don't mind, Jose, I'd love to start with you. So tell us about your journey and your work.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm very grateful to be here to share this space with all of you. And I guess my personal journey begins, well, before I tell you my personal journey, I would just like to say that we've been talking a lot about, these concepts of us, them, and moving into the we. And what I hear a lot when I'm involved in panels on restorative justice, on criminal justice reform, and what that looks like is that oftentimes people see me as a career prosecutor, and immediately there's certain biases or certain ideas that kick in. Is he with us? Is he with them? And so I like to start with, how it is that I got into not just the law, but, I'm a first-generation immigrant. I came here when I was 11 years old. And when I first got here, moved into the Northeast, and just the fact that my name was Jose was, grounds for being discriminated against and picked on. And so I know the effects that can have on somebody emotionally and the feelings of being ostracized and isolated. And so fast forward, I'm now in a career for the last 25 years where it's a very adversarial system. It's definitely us versus them, or at least, that's how it's been viewed traditionally. And it's not exactly a collaborative system. It's not exactly conducive to really the best outcomes and best results. And so in my career as a prosecutor, I moved from thinking about trials and conviction rates, and moving into what is the best outcome. My best work as a prosecutor has come when I have found a like-minded public defender or defense attorney, and together we've been able to come up with the best solution for the client. And so 5 years ago, I was asked to develop and implement a restorative justice-based diversion program for young offenders at the city attorney's office. And my boss, Mike Fuhrer, said, look at best models, see what you can come up with. And we looked around the state and the nation and different models, and so we developed and implemented a filing diversion program where individuals that are arrested, instead of being prosecuted, they're offered a chance to voluntarily participate in a model that is based after victim offender mediation, where they come together with community members and they look at the root cause of the offense. And that process and implementing restorative justice principles of inclusion, encounter, amends, and reintegration was not only incredibly successful in terms of the reoffending rates for our participants. Our participants, we're intercepting them before we charge them, before we convict them, before any prosecution happens, and they're reoffending at a rate 5 to 7 times lower than if we prosecute, convict them, and put them on probation. And it was really, I know it sounds corny, but it was really about love. It was really about treating individuals with dignity, with respect, and allowing them the safe space to take responsibility for what they did and move forward in a more positive way. And so that program has been tremendously successful. We've had over 4,000 individuals that we've been able to divert away from the traditional prosecution, punitive-based system, and put them through this process where they have a very intimate conversation, a structured dialogue about how to move forward together. And we're looking to expand it. And I guess that's how I got to meet you, Rich, because I thought restorative justice and its principles, its values are great. But man, like me, a lot of the young men and women that I see participating in my program, they've dealt with a lot of trauma. Right. They've dealt with a lot of childhood, experiences that are leading them to behave in a certain way, and they don't have the tools to self-manage, to modify their behavior. And that's where mindfulness really, for me, kicked in. And just almost by chance, I picked up the book Search Inside Yourself, and I thought, wow, like long-lasting and meaningful change starts from within. It started from within for me and in my own personal journey, and I thought it would be beautiful if we could do this as a prosecutor's office, expand and incorporate a mindfulness curriculum for our participants in our programs.
Yeah. You want to share with them what we have planned and what we're hoping for?
Yes. So, very, very excited. So when I first met Rich, I did my own personal dive into childhood trauma, negative love patterns, and it followed the death of my sister, who was only a year and a half older than me. And when I did my own work and I went through your 2-day training, I thought, wow, like this is great for me, but imagine my young participants who have no self-awareness and they don't even know like where all this like anger and resentment and frustration or anxiety is coming from. And I thought, well, let me reach out to Chade Meng Tang. And I was calling Chade and I was trying to get him on the phone, and his assistant said, well, he's not going to be able to talk to you, but we're going to put you in touch with the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute. And that's how I met Rich and Tyler, and we started pitching ideas, and we thought, well, before we can get into the criminal justice system and how to help individuals that are criminal justice involved, we first have to educate the criminal justice professionals. And so in July, we are planning a 2-day session for judges, prosecutors, public defenders, alternate public defenders, law enforcement, and probation. And the goal is really to have everybody speaking the same language, using the same definitions, and to identify site champions at each of these institutions so that they can then forward the work or expand the work of mindfulness
They don't know what's going to hit them. This whole mindfulness compassion thing, it's like, bam, this is a whole new paradigm, we hope. But it's not new. So we're really looking forward to that. That's happening this summer. So stay tuned. And thank you, for sharing that vision and the possibility. I mean, we're really here on stage to explore what's possible when we apply this to systems level. Which brings me to my dear friend and our next panelist, which is Yizhao, who now we're going to move 7,000 miles away or so from LA to the nation of Bhutan, where as a nation, they are really undertaking this across all of their government agencies and ministries. So Yizhao, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, the work you're doing, how you got there, and what's going on in Bhutan?
Yay. I'm so happy to share my own personal story, but also knowing that probably I'm wearing Kira and I'm representing the Bhutan story as well. So I'm holding my brothers and sisters that are there, but I'm here for all of us. My journey started at Google. I was a Googler in Singapore. And the wonderful culture that I was part of is every single year we'll bring some Googlers to do volunteer work. And in 2013, I joined 60 Googlers to Bhutan to volunteer in 14 different projects in any kind of sectors and communities. And we were there for 1 week, and I was assigned to do work with children and youth. And that whole week just deeply touched my heart. Not only the beautiful environment and peaceful feeling that I got from Bhutan and the people, but especially the children and the youth. And I was wondering, is there something I can do more for Bhutan? And people over there say Taksang Tiger's Nest Monastery up in the mountain cliff is a very sacred place, and people go there on pilgrimage, and it's a wish-fulfilling temple. So all the 60 Googlers, we did hike up, and in that monastery, I was thinking what kind of wish I want to wish for. And at that time, I thought, in 5 years, I would like to come back to Bhutan and teach or share mindfulness with maybe with a class of children. I hope that could happen. And then fast forward, I was trained as a Search Inside Yourself teacher at Google. And my first program was co-taught with Rich. That's where we met. And
In Singapore.
In Singapore, yes. And then, meanwhile, this Bhutan dream, it was always at the back of my mind. It's always in my heart. And just as 2 months before 5 years was coming, Rich and I co-taught in China. And then he was saying, where next after China? I said, Bhutan. So really, this whole vision has its own way of manifestation. 2 months later, and exactly 5 years later after the wish, we are on the plane landing into Paro and back into this peaceful valley of the mountain kingdom. And not only that, the dinner that we had on that arrival date was with the Minister of Education, the former Minister of Education of Bhutan, Limpo Norbu. And we had a dinner. I was sharing both my personal story and Rich bringing Search Inside Yourself as an organization. How may we work together on something?
But wait, let me also say, during that dinner, just because you may be wondering, wait, you're talking about bringing like this version of mindfulness to this ancient kingdom that has like these thousands of years old practice around mindfulness. So you remember at that dinner, I said, with all due respect, Minister, and I'm not trying to talk us out of a job here, but what do we have to offer you? Remember that?
Yeah, why are we here?
Why are we here? Like, honestly, it was really important to just kind of understand that, I think.
Yeah, and if you know Bhutan, Bhutan is already very mindful in many ways. The way they care for people, care for the nature, and be aware of what is innerly important. And they even have a GNH, Gross National Happiness Index, versus GDP focus.
So what did Minister
Yeah,
Norbu tell?
why are we here? um, but the more work we started doing is actually we're welcomed.
Yeah.
There is alignment with the culture and what they were already believe in and what we offer with neuroscience, with practical tools, and with a way that we don't have to wait until in retirement to start our practice. We can do it right here, right now, with oneself and with the relationships we have. And that's how we started our project with MOE. We trained
Which is?
Ministry of Education, and we trained a batch of teachers, SIY teachers, and these master teachers start to roll out program during their summer vacation, and within 1 month, we trained the whole nation's education system.
Wow.
It was 10,000 teachers, and 10,000 teachers going to 500 schools. No matter how remote they are, there always is a school, and there are children there. So they start to receive this day-to-day practice in their own environment and from their dear teachers who are trained. And we thought, wow, that was big. And yet the dream continued to unfold. 1 year later, after we have fully completed our project with MOE, the country leaders start to reach out to us, and we had a beautiful partnership working to share mindfulness with the entire country, with 10 ministries and plus 71 public agencies to bring this work and this way of being not only in education, but in healthcare, in agriculture, forestry, law enforcement, everything, the entire government, civil servants.
Right, and just to be clear, as Minister Norbu said, they do have beautiful traditions, ancient traditions, deep, profound traditions around this. And they saw this set of offerings as complementary, that it was secular and science-based and really, really practical for school teachers in front of a classroom who didn't have to go to a mountaintop monastery to practice mindfulness. And I think that was the kind of corner that we turned with them, right? That like it's really accessible to the people in the fields, the people in the schools, and it really, in many ways, just is a complement to the profound tradition that they practice every day of their own.
And the beautiful thing is they do have a background and a container and a way of being in their culture that if they do desire to go deeper, they're right there. They don't have to go anywhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, and so we collected data on 3,000 of the school teachers.
Yeah, we received nearly 8,000 survey results, but after 1 month of practice, we also compared the before and after to see if there's any change. And there is positive trends across all the factors that we're tracking, like self-awareness, self-management, compassion, empathy, and leadership, and satisfaction with life. And I thought that was the story, but the story continues still. After finishing the second round of rollout with the whole country, Bhutan leaders committed to not letting this to die out after we are gone. So they basically engaged institutions and schools and universities to continue teach the program year on year to all the new civil servants that are going to join service during their onboarding training, and to all the retirees and all the people who are retiring, having a retirement training and put mindfulness there to give them more tools as they transition into their retirement.
What a concept, a mindful and compassionate government, and a government that's aspiring to practice, at least aspiring to practice those qualities. So thank you for sharing the story. That's beautiful. And then let's go to another 7,000 miles around the world, because you just came from Israel, my friend. And tell us about your journey, your work, this link between mindfulness and compassion and social change.
So I'll start by saying that I'm one generation removed from an illiterate woman born on a mountaintop in Baghdad, who was airlifted in 1949 to Israel in the middle of the night, one suitcase per family, brought as an oppressed group of population, Jews from Iraq, to the state of Israel, which was newly formed. And there's this connection, I grew up partly in Israel and then, grew up here in the States, which was a huge privilege for me. And it took me a long time to recognize that I grew up in an area that is immersed in conflict. And I'm a product of that. But I'm a survivor in a way. I'm a survivor because I'm able to, see things in a completely different light because I'm not mired in the conflict on a daily basis like the rest of my family is, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, etc. I grew up in a very biased and prejudiced way. I grew up as traditional Orthodox Jewish girl in Florida. And I would spend a lot of time in Israel growing up, and I was taught to hate Palestinians, I was taught that all Arab-speaking people wanted to hurt me or do something to me, or just by virtue of me being, Israeli or Jewish. And it really wasn't until I started doing a lot of the work internally, like contemplative practice, really just kind of questioning the connection between all of humanity and really starting to understand the conflict and the consequences of all the conflict that has been going on, for centuries now, but really for the last, since pre-1948, that I decided to do something really courageous, I would say, which is reach out and actually put myself in a position that was really uncomfortable. So my work I call myself a self-care activist. I'm a trauma-informed mindfulness teacher. And my work is really, the premise of my work is based on three things. The first is that we need to show up. 90% of life is just showing up. I think many of us wait to show up until we think, we have to be whole when we show up. We have to really do the work first on ourselves so that we can actually show up for people. And I will say that that's absolutely not true. We all need to show up for each other. The second premise is no barrier to entry. It means that I never want to see the practice that I teach as a practice that's for the population of haves. It has to be inclusive, and if that means that I need to figure out ways to reach across the aisle to make sure that I'm using my position of privilege, I'm using my privilege as a teacher, the fact that I walk around in white skin all day, to reach out and to make sure that we're bringing and having very, difficult conversations, and we're bringing people to the programs that we're offering. That's really important. And the last thing is that I always try to ask really difficult questions, things that also make me feel uncomfortable when I'm in those uncomfortable spaces. So if I'm in a place like South Side of Chicago, or I'm in a place like Liberty City, Miami, or in Gaza, which is where I just was, I literally just arrived yesterday, I ask the question, I show up in an uncomfortable place where people may have a stigma and already a bias towards me, and I say, what do you need? How can I help you? How can I use my platform to assist and to help to reduce the suffering that is happening in your community? And so just by simply doing those three things, I've been able to create these incredible programs and connections with a myriad of other individuals and teachers and sponsors and really, philanthropic individuals. And the way that I'm spending my time nowadays is I spend a third of my time in communities affected by gun violence and by mass shootings in this country. There are 40,000 people a year that die of gun violence in this country. That's more than 100 people a day. Like while we were sitting here, somebody or more than one person died of gun violence. That's just really hard to comprehend. How many of you, just by a show of hands, were here last year at the Parkland panel? Okay. And how many of you felt really moved by that panel? But how many of you actually, then when another mass shooting happened, because it did, or when you heard about gun violence in a community, an underserved community, or an inner city community where you live, actually were moved to do something about it? Great.
And tell us how that played out for you, how you
Yeah.
were actually doing some of that work with, let's say, the Parkland community or in Gaza, or both.
Yeah, I'm part of an organization now called Survivors Empowered, and Survivors Empowered was founded by two parents whose daughter was murdered in Aurora in the movie theater shooting. They sold all of their belongings. They decided that they were going to be first responders that go into communities affected by gun violence, by mass shootings. And so really, they're like the FEMA of mass shootings now. And the idea is that while there are first responders that are triaging the physical issues that are obviously, taking place, nobody was really going in and addressing, especially at the epicenter, and then kind of working their way out. The epicenter being the victims' families and survivors who were in the event. That they're not addressing things like trauma-informed healing practices. And so the idea was that, if this organization can go in and within the first 24 to 48 hours start to offer these practices, that's how, that was the idea of how things started. Now we have this more formal process because we go in and our idea is that we need to build capacity. And the way we build capacity is by training other survivors. So for example, when the shooting happened here in California, Santa Clarita, in Saugus, we had parents from Parkland and from Columbine and Sandy Hook who within 24 hours were on a plane and heading here.
And the support that they have had to build their own capacity to do that work, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah.
'Cause that is the mindfulness and compassion cultivation piece, right?
Correct.
So you enabled them, it sounds like, through retreats,
So Sharon Salzberg, who's my teacher, and I have been putting together multiple day retreats, both at the actual, in the communities. So whether it's in Parkland or in Pittsburgh or in communities that are affected by gun violence every day, like Chicago or in Liberty City, Miami, where Silly is going to be doing a program as well. We basically offer half-day, full-day retreats and then multiple-day retreats. And then what we also do is annually we offer a retreat. Last year it was in Barre, Massachusetts. This year we had to turn people away because there was just not enough space. So this year we're so fortunate that Garrison was able to accommodate us. And so in August we're hosting, dozens and dozens of survivors and families who come in for 4 days. And the whole point of that experience is it plants a seed with them. And that seed is that our hope is that out of that experience, they'll want to then become mindfulness teachers themselves. And so we actually have several parents, teachers, people who are survivors that are now in the process of becoming trauma-informed mindfulness teachers. They're going through the MBSR curriculum, and they are then going to be able...
Mindfulness-based stress reduction.
Yeah.
For listeners and
Right.
who might not be familiar with that.
And they are going to be able to offer it to other survivors when there's a mass shooting or continual gun violence in a community. And we're also bringing the Search Inside Yourself curriculum as well to those communities, because what we found was that when we would go into schools or we would try to go to like the government, the municipalities, they would look at us like we had like 14 horns coming out of our head, like, what do you mean? Yeah, how is mindfulness going to help? Because there wasn't a level playing field in terms of the lingo. We weren't speaking the same language. So what we found was that by bringing in a 2-day training with Search Inside Yourself and bringing leaders, and so Rich and his team was able to come to Parkland, and we had 3 mayors, 4 city managers, people from the police, police force, just many, many different organizations, leadership from the school district and beyond, 125 of them that did the 2-day training, and that are now all speaking the same language. It's so much easier for me to pick up the phone and call the mayor of Coconut Creek and say, hey, I really need like space for this 1-day retreat, and I really need like some funding for it. And she now gets what I'm trying to do, which is amazing.
So thank you. And I want to end, because we're kind of coming short on time, with like a really profound experience you shared with me just backstage, because having just come from Gaza.
Yeah.
That the promise in all of this, the possibility in all of this, seems like a connection to our common humanity and our capacity to heal from that place. But you have a very profound meditation that you led in Gaza that I think demonstrates this beautifully. So I think it's a wonderful way in concluding minutes, if you might share it with us, just what happened.
So there's a beautiful meditation that we learn at Search Inside Yourself, which is called Just Like Me. And you sit across from somebody and you're kind of opening your eyes and closing your eyes. And you are really, in a very empathetic way, understanding how connected you are to the other person, and that you all have like tragedies, hopes, dreams, and that we're all so similar to each other. So while I was in Israel, we were working with several organizations that are bringing together Arab and Jewish populations to, try to create that connection. And one of the organizations is called the Parent Circle. The Parent Circle basically brings together parents whose sons or daughters were lost either to a terrorist bombing or were killed by the Israeli Defense Forces on the border, who have had enough of the cycle of violence, and that they're really desperately looking for ways to heal. So imagine being in a room with individuals who lost their children or their brothers and sisters that are from each opposing side of the wall. And so we did this meditation of Just Like Me, and there was I was just like really focused on, there were many people that were partnered up that completely moved me, but I was focused on specifically 2 parents. One who had an 8-year-old daughter who was blown up on a bus in Jerusalem, and one who had an 8-year-old daughter that was shot by an IDF, an Israeli Defense Force soldier, for throwing a rock throwing rocks, basically. And they were staring at each other and having this experience of just like me, that they can both speak the same language of loss, and that they both have gone through such, a unimaginable experience, but through this shared empathy that they could share for each other, that this really truly is the hope that, that we can ourselves as mindfulness teachers and mindful people in the community generate in the world. And so what I'll leave you with is this. My mantra is, and I tell Rich this all the time, is the reason I sit down to meditate is so I can rise up. So I will invite you to make sure that when you close your eyes, it's not just an introspective experience, but that you also open your eyes. Open your eyes and put yourself in uncomfortable situations, ask difficult questions, and make sure that you invite people in to that world when you close your eyes.
Thank you. So on behalf of this community and our common humanity, I thank you all for being here. We will actually, this was a very short panel for all the work that's being done. This group will actually be going to the Q&A stage. And it will be another session of pure question and answers. If you want to learn more, you could also visit our site where we have their stories here, which is siyli.org/wisdom. Please come, please talk to us further. Onward and deeper together, friends. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.